Hero here from Umbra Games with a review of Persona 5 for my 100th YouTube review. The game was released on both PlayStation 3 and 4. It's been 9 years since Atlus has released a numbered entry in the Persona series. For those not familiar, it's a turn-based Japanese role-playing game in the Shin Megami Tensei franchise, with its focus on the life and mystical adventures of Japanese students. Atlus was pretty vocal about people not streaming the game past a certain point, so as not to ruin it for audiences. I'll keep videos out of context and keep any specific non-feature information to a minimum, so as not to talk spoilers for those of you wanting to play. Persona 5 opens with the main protagonist that you name, but has a codename of Joker, being sent away from his parents to attend Shujin High School, where he befriends other kids who are outcasts for one reason or another. They all come to inherit supernatural abilities by combating their various forms of oppression to release their personas, each unique to their respective character. The students don the name Phantom Thieves, and use these powers to change the hearts of people by entering cognitive palaces via a smartphone app, erected most often by some particularly evil adults with sinister intentions. Persona 5 stands out for most of its contemporaries by proceeding through the game on a daily basis, almost as a sort of life simulator. You start in early April and finish, I don't think it's a spoiler, in late December. You go to school most days and can otherwise fill your time by hanging out with acquaintances or by participating in various activities like reading books, studying, going to batting practice, or even getting a job. Most activities pass time, allowing you to perform at most 2 per day. Your choices award you with various points into your social stats, knowledge, charm, guts, kindness, and proficiency, and relationship points, which I'll get into in a minute. Your social stats will control some dialogue responses and determine which relationships you can form, as well as some other daily task options, like proficiency, for example, boosts the number of times you can craft infiltration tools. Now, after the first couple of days pass, you'll make your first trip into what they call the metaverse, which is where the personas and dungeons begin. While in the metaverse, you navigate dangerous areas where you see enemies roaming the screen. You can hide in shadows and ambush them, giving each of your party members the first turn to act when combat begins. If an enemy spots you, it will raise the alert level of the palace, and they will charge at you, and if they strike you first, they get first turn. Now, if you can manage to attack them by hitting the X button while they're coming at you, turn will just proceed in stat order. There's a cover-based system for all this, where you can hide in shadows, and enemies generally won't be able to see you, as long as you navigate carefully. There's a bit of weirdness at times, as there's a certain amount of relative positioning between your character and your camera that has to be established in order to hit the ambush. A few times that ended up kinda sloppy for me, causing a regular attack rather than an unmasking ambush. Now, as mentioned, combat is turn-based. There are 8 elements and 2 forms of physical damage, and each of your character's personas specializes in one. Characters and enemies each have weaknesses and strength on an elemental basis, and if their weaknesses hit, you get what's known as a 1 more, enabling the character to take another turn, or in your case, pass that extra turn to another party member. If the main protagonist goes down, regardless of who else is standing though, your game is over. So it's actually fairly imperative that you engage most enemies in an ambush and hit them with their weakness immediately, because combat momentum can really shift on the fly. With several shadows having instant death moves, it can end your game and take you back to your last save frustratingly quickly. Strangely, it seemed most bosses had the option to restart from the beginning of the battle rather than the last save room, so I expected it to be just a little more hardcore than that. Now, while party members are locked to their specific persona, Joker, your main character's codename, as they all have self-chosen codenames in the metaverse, can summon all enemies and their powers once they've been captured. One place persona has been unique in the JRPG world is your ability to converse and negotiate with the enemies known as shadows. This is done by hitting all targets currently in battle with an ability of their weakness, or by hitting them with a critical hit. Once knocked down, you have the option to do an all-out attack, causing some serious damage, or to begin negotiations, asking them to either join you, give you money, or hand you an item. Now, if you want them to join you, they'll ask you 2 multiple-choice questions, where you have to think like a mischievous demon, as so many of the options don't really go the way you'd think. You'll receive a favorable, neutral, or angry response, which come with the consequences you'd expect. Most of these interactions seem resolved by their reaction to the second question, with favorable joining you, neutral giving you an item and telling you to go away, and angry getting them out of the weakened state to attack you and sometimes summoning a friend. They can only hold so many personas at a time, and they level up separately in addition to your characters, giving them access to new, more powerful abilities as they level up. Really, a comparison to Pokemon is kinda accurate, with personas able to hold up to 8 abilities simultaneously, forcing you to dispose of old ones in order to receive new ones once the cap is reached. You want to ensure you keep a wide variety of elements, buffs, and debuffs at your disposal at all times to help quickly quell those enemy threats. Now, Joker can also enter an area called the Velvet Room, where he meets a curious old man named Igor and twin jail wardens. While in this realm, Joker is in a prison cell where he can talk through the bars to his captors. While this does advance some of the game's mysterious narrative, the main purpose is to grant the ability to create new personas by executing ones from Joker's stock, summon ones that he's captured before, and a few other abilities that are unlocked as the game proceeds, including sacrificing specific personas to make others stronger and add abilities that they normally wouldn't inherit. Of course, there's a registry that keeps track of how many persona you've captured for all of those completionists out there. Your party's equipment consists of a melee weapon, a ranged weapon, one piece of armor, and an accessory. You can find items in treasure chests or buy them from various shops. New waves of items are released around the time you finish each dungeon, and while you can feel the boost from equipment, I actually only ended up upgrading every other dungeon, and not really feeling too crippled from that. Now, the Metaverse forms one other challenge a month or two into the game, known as Mementos. Mementos is a randomly generated multi-level dungeon where you can find treasure as well as shadows you faced before in the game's palaces. This is pretty much the only source of what I'd consider true side quests, as various narrative branches and relationships will give you targets to hunt down in Mementos, each offering various rewards and are often necessary to advance the relationships with friends and acquaintances. Each deeper section of Mementos opens up with the game's story progression, but you can enter cleared areas as often as you like, each time randomly generating a new map, treasure, and enemies for you to claim. Now, if you go back to my Tokyo Mirage Sessions #FE review on Wii U, which is a crossover between Shin Megami Tensei and Nintendo's Fire Emblem series, you're probably going to see a lot of the same commentary from me here. I'm very selective about the little anime that I actually do watch, so it kind of blows my mind when I'm sucked into these anime-style games, especially about Japanese high schoolers. I just chalk it up to excellent writing and narrative in this case, with each of the characters having interesting backgrounds or tragedies, and is presented in a way that makes you want to learn more about them. Almost all are completely identifiable in one way or another. One of the questions my friend asked me about this game is if it came across campy, and while there are a few moments of awkwardness per the usual anime style, the game takes dark turns really fast, more than balancing out the random off-putting cultural humor. You form relationships in the game with both party members and select NPCs for each card in the tarot deck, and work towards a 10-star ranking with each, granting abilities every couple to a few levels. The party members share some ability pool in this case, but the NPCs provide an even wider range of benefits, which were pretty fun to discover, and provided some very cool enhancements, but I'll leave that discovery to you. Now, I'm no expert on Japanese culture, but being produced by a Japanese company and recreating a lot of the areas from Tokyo itself, I also assume that a lot of what is in this game to be fairly culturally accurate. Seeing the pressures of children from their parents, as well as people with a high sense of honor, as well as some odd things like relationships with minors being slightly frowned upon, but overall not seeming to be penalized. The school days bring lectures and questions you can answer for knowledge points, which bring to light sometimes fascinating trivia, which, I'm not gonna lie, I googled a few answers at times. The personas themselves tap nearly into every mythology from Egyptian, Norse, Greek, Japanese, and even Thai. Now, some of their representations are not quite what I'd expect, and some are just slightly altered character models of previous ones, but overall there's a ton of diversity in enemies and personas alike. Persona 5 is really long. People ask if that's just side content, but the game kind of takes a different approach to side content as mentioned. You have to engage in something in order to pass the time. The game's palaces come and go on specific calendar days, and they have to be completed before time runs out or the game is over permanently. So you'll find yourself choosing every day what to do. Now, I realize this game is huge as it is, but most events end up just in dialogue cutscenes. And while well written, it would have been a little more engaging had it required more user input. Hanging with friends gives you dialogue choices, which gain 1 to 3 points to that relationship based on your response. The flower shop will have you picking out specific items for bouquets at times. The noodle shop makes you pay attention to orders and repeat them once or twice, and a video game session or two required a quick input. But on the whole, the game's 90 to 100 hours, yes that's right, is conversationally driven day passing. Now, when you choose to enter the metaverse after school, it will initially take up both actions for that day. You can stay in the dungeon for as long as you like without the days passing on you, with your only limit being your magic or SP pool, your ability to survive. Items to replenish SP can be few and far between, or really expensive, so you usually try to make a dive as deep and economically as possible. I would often try to knock out the entire dungeon in 1 or 2 trips so that I had my days to spend building relationships and stats. It can be difficult to pace yourself properly, not inherently knowing how many free days you'll actually have, and what social stats will come to you for all your activities. I ended up with 15 of the 21 relationships maxed out, and all social stats at their max, but I hit the maximum on social stats early enough that other activities were producing those points and were wasted. I would highly recommend playing the game without trying to manage all activities, using a walkthrough for timing and proper responses, and just enjoy it. Respond how you naturally would. I was a little frustrated at first through April and May on how tightly I was on rails, but then realized that nearly every day in that period was spent teaching me about a new feature or concept, which in hindsight was a perfect method of tutorial for the game's expanding feature set. And believe it or not, if the 95 hours isn't enough for you, there's a New Game Plus mode for completionists to pick everything up. Now, I won't disclose any further information about the plot, but with the length of the game, the continually unraveling mystery that doesn't just spiral into nonsense like a lot of JRPGs do, is very well made. There were even key plot things that were given away sporadically throughout the game that you just missed sometimes just from the sheer amount of dialogue that you kind of facepalm later knowing that you should have caught it. Now, my final note is the production values of this game. I realize it's out on PlayStation 3 and 4, which always makes me question if we're getting a skimpy version on PS4 so that it can run on both, but it is a game with a fairly simplistic art style, so it should be able to run a little lighter. The game was originally supposed to be released somewhere around a year and a half before it actually did, which, while I didn't see where it was at that date obviously, this game is so incredibly polished. On top of that, it's really stylish. Whether you like the style or not is obviously subjective, but I never got tired of the battle over screen, or the half-funk, half-J-pop tunes. Each party member is unique in appearance while in the metaverse, and their personas are all based on famous thieves throughout the ages and cultures with some really fun designs. The hours of voice acting are very well recorded with everything except believing that Morgana the cat is male. So if you like turn-based RPGs, especially ones with combat where you can't just mash the button to get through battles, you can tolerate or like anime, you enjoy reading, you're looking for an epic with relatable characters, want a taste of some Japanese culture, you like to collect creatures, and have about 100 hours to spare, or if you've never tried or know that you enjoy some life simulation in your game, or just overall if you're looking for a modern, well-produced game from a nearly seemingly dead genre, Persona 5 is a solid choice. Rated as a turn-based JRPG, Persona 5 hits an 87 out of 100, with 50 being an average game. This is Jiro for Umbra Games. Thanks for watching. Back to the grind with some hopefully shorter titles to get back on track. Subscribe for more videos or follow me on Twitter @Umbra Games.